Hello, everyone. Several sources today are covering Netherlands and their plan to make drones. The one thing that I disagree with is that the sources reporting on this are saying Netherlands are going to make drones for Ukraine. That is not entirely accurate. Netherlands are going to make drones with Ukraine. Yes, some of the drones will go to Ukraine. However, some of them are going to be contributed to the stockpile that EU needs, not to mention passing on the technology, the knowledge, the designs, the experience that Ukrainians had developed slowly and painfully at a very high cost over the last 4 years. So it's not like Netherlands is going to just set up a plant that is going to have like a conveyor line straight to Ukraine. It's not like that. This is a mutually beneficial relationship, just like the one Ukraine has been looking to secure with other partners, including Germany, France, the UK, Japan, the Baltics, and so on and so forth. Everybody wins. This is a good deal for pretty much everyone involved. And another thing, and this is brought up quite often, is that all of those countries have their own technology talent. So they can look at what Ukraine has pretty much had to come up with in a hurry. Some things had to be cobbled together. Some things had to be made less than perfect. Of course, no design is ever perfect, but you know what I mean. Because of the war conditions, because of the part shortages, because of the issues with supply lines and so on. So outside of the war conditions, engineers, strategists, military specialists can all look at what Ukraine has come up with and improve on it. And again, the knowledge is something that you can't quite put a price on. Now, NATO and EU continue saying, we're not going to abandon you, Ukraine. And I hope so much that this is true. Now, partners outside of the US have been very consistent and very steadfast. And again, because so many of them get the view of this war from the front row, particularly the countries in the Eastern Europe. So they have this ongoing motivation to keep things going. And also, it's not just, the drone flyovers and stuff like that, and also the geographic proximity, the refugee pressure, all of that. It's also other stuff that Russia has been doing. Because we talked about this. We talked about the cyber attacks. We talked about the interference in the elections. We talked about acts of sabotage. All of that matters. And pretty much most of the EU members have been exposed to some form of Russia's interference or another. So they are definitely motivated not to abandon Ukraine because shit's real for them. And of course, Russia goes on to bitch about it, saying, if you collaborate with Ukraine to, work on the drone technologies, blah, 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 we can't have that. You are, interfering in the war. And I'm like, shut up. You're collaborating with China. You're collaborating with North Korea. You're collaborating with Iran. You're collaborating with Belarus, shut the fuck up. Incidentally, at no point did Ukraine threaten to attack any of your collaborators, Russia. Whereas you are threatening to attack Europe on a daily basis. So shut up. And Zelensky once again reiterated that Russia presents a global threat, which again, I agree with him on. After horrific attacks on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, with missiles early today, several people were injured, including the emergency crew members, buildings were damaged, and a 12-year-old child died. Another Ukrainian child died because Putin has an itch he cannot scratch. In addition, Ukraine's port of Odessa, once again, has been attacked. A person was killed there and 6 more people were injured. Just a reminder, Odessa is a major port. That is basically where a lot of Ukrainian exports are going through. Not only that, but humanitarian aid that comes from Ukraine. And I mentioned this many times. So, Ukraine supports multiple developing countries, providing them with corn, wheat, etc. Ironically, we now know that some of those countries openly support Russia, and some of them had people hoodwinked into fighting for Russia in this war. Remember, I told you the other day that headline from Independent talking about Russians surrendering to the drones. So we're starting to get bits and pieces of this picture. There have been a lot of updates to the military operations, integrating the land-going drones in addition to the aerial drones with the infantry. And this is something I mentioned some months ago when the land-going drones first appeared on the scene with the photographs and the testing results and so on. So, the intention at the time was to fill in the holes in the very long, very spread out front line. Apparently that's been successful because, as you all know, Russia failed to make any progress, any land gains in March, while suffering record casualties. So it's working. Another thing, and this is something that I know a little bit about, is that it's not just armed drones that are making a difference, but, for example, the Medevac carts. It's not a car. It's basically a robot with wheels, a platform with wheels that collects wounded from the battlefield and then brings them to the medics. So now the medics don't have to risk their lives hauling wounded on their own shoulders. We have an army medic in our family who is out there right now, and we are glad she doesn't have to go out there, and that she has this technology working for her, bringing the wounded to her. So as of right now, we know that we have over 100 attacks using robots, using ground drones, have been carried out by Ukrainian military at the front lines, and good on them. If this enables us not only hold the line steady, but start pushing Russians back, even better. More to come.